Welcome everyone to the eMedica GP Training Essentials webinar on how to get into GP Training 2023. So for those that haven't met me before, my name is Mohibur Rahman. I'm a portfolio GP and a consultant in medical education. Our team at eMedica have now trained over 62,000 delegates, all the way from people applying for GP training like yourselves, those doing MRC GP, but also we help to teach GP trainers and educators, and even we've taught examiners. So in terms of the format, we've got three broad parts. Part one, I'm going to go through an overview of the GP training entry process. Part two, I'll cover the key changes for 2023 entry and also the answers to frequently asked questions that have been asked or seen asked in various groups again and again and again. And then part three is the live Q&A if you want to ask anything that's not already been covered here. So let's make a start. We're going to go through an overview of the process to get into GP training. So there's four stages. Stage one is the application and long listing. Stage two is the MSRA. Stage three is when you get an offer, if you qualify for an offer. And stage four is the rotation allocations and then the pre-employment checks. Okay, so some key dates for your diary, very important. So applications are opening on Thursday, the 3rd of November. They close on the 1st of December 2022, and you apply via the Oriel website. All applications for specialty training within the UK at ST1 and CT1 level are managed through Oriel. By the 21st of December, if your application has been accepted and you meet all the criteria and you're longlisted, you'll get an invitation to book for the MSRA. You can't just book the MSRA and you can't book it before you get an invitation. So you apply first for specialty training. If your application is accepted and you're longlisted, then you get an invitation. When you get that invitation, you can choose when to sit the exam. So the window for the exam in round one is from the 5th to the 17th of January. And there's venues all over the UK and also in many countries outside the UK. Okay, you'll go to a Pearson VUE test center and sit the exam. And you'll sit the MSRA, which is two papers, an SJT paper and a clinical paper. The 10th of February, you'll get your score, but you won't get your rank or whether you've got a job or not. You will just get your score, okay? The actual job offers and when you find out your rank, that's going to happen in March. The exact date hasn't been confirmed yet. And then the hold deadline is the 4th of April, the upgrade deadline, the 11th of April. The actual jobs will start on the 2nd of August, 2023. So these are some key dates to just secure into your diary now, okay? The most important ones are to get your application in on time, because if it's even an hour late, it will not be accepted. And then to keep this window free so that you can book a date and also know how long have I got? I need to start preparing for my MSRA. Hopefully a lot of you have already started. So how many jobs will there be? Well, round one is the main round. There's usually about 4,200 jobs, and it's UK-wide. Every deanery recruits in round one. The jobs start in August 2023 for the next round one. Round two is limited areas. So some areas will have 0 jobs in round two. They just don't recruit because they fill them all in round one. So usually it's like 10% or less of the jobs in round one. Mostly it's unfilled jobs. There are a few jobs that are specifically for round two. But to give you an idea, in past years, there have been somewhere between 300 and 500 jobs in round two. And those jobs will be starting February 2024 onwards. For example, in the latest round two, which is just finished, there were some jobs that actually started in April rather than February. The exact dates for round two have not been confirmed yet. So in terms of competition, GP remains the most popular specialty. And the competition levels have been increasing a lot in recent years. We've been doing this now for over 17 years, okay? And I've never seen competition like it's been in the last few years, okay? So if we look at 2019, just over 5,000 people applied for about 3,800 jobs. The overall ratio was 1.3 and a bit to 1 in terms of applicants to jobs. 2020, it went up to 1.5 to 1. 2021, 2,000 extra people nearly applied, from 5,700 to 7,600. And there were a few more jobs, 4,000 and a bit. So the ratio went up to 1.74. The 2022 applications, which have finished, they've not been published yet. But we do know, though, if we look at all specialties, there was a 20% increase overall. Now, that might be different in different specialties. They haven't published the data. But I'm confident when that data gets published, there will have been more than 8,000 applicants for just over 4,000 jobs. The ratio will have increased to nearly or more than 2 to 1 in 2022. 2023, I think, is going to be even more competitive. I'll talk to you later about some of the reasons for that. So this one slide covers the 4 stages, and I'll just give you a complete overview. And if you want to read the full article that this pictures taken from, which also includes the links to lots of relevant documents and other articles on how to prepare. You can find it at this web address here. Again, Mariam will post the link to that for you. So stage 1 is the application. So you're going to do that in November. Okay. And when you apply, as long as you meet all of the eligibility criteria, the main ones being that you will have 2 years clinical experience by the start date of training. You don't need to have the 2 years at the date of applying, but you need to have it by the start of training, i.e. by August 2023. So for example, someone who's in F2 now can see by August 2023, they'll have foundation year 1 and they'll have foundation year 2. So they'll have 2 years, you see. Similarly, someone that trained outside of the UK, they might have their internship year and 1 more year after that. So i.e. 2 years in clinical experience by the start date of training, okay? You also need to have your F2 competencies signed off, and you need to have your GMC registration and a license to practice by the start date of training. Again, you don't need to have that at the time of applying, but by the start date of training, you must have that. So everyone that meets the eligibility criteria is guaranteed to be longlisted. All right. The application itself is just checking, do you meet the criteria? The application can't be sort of better or worse. There's no questions to answer that are going to be assessed. There's no essay questions. There's no portfolio that anyone's going to assess or look at. It's just, do you meet the basic eligibility criteria and the full eligibility criteria, because this is the most important ones, but they're on this page here. So those that get longlisted will get an invitation to book the MSRA. You can't just sit that exam. It's not a standalone exam like finals or PLAB or something. You know, it's part of the recruitment process. So, for example, if you didn't apply, you can't sit the exam. If you applied but you don't meet the requirements, you won't get an invitation. Your application will be rejected. You're not going to be able to sit the exam. Okay, so you get longlisted and you book the exam. The exam itself has got 2 papers. The professional dilemma papers first, 50 situational judgment test questions in 95 minutes. And then straight after, like 5-minute break, then there will be the clinical problem solving paper, 97 clinical multiple choice questions in 75 minutes. Now, these 2 papers are equally weighted. They each contribute 50% of your rank. Okay. And the scores get allocated initially to a band. Band 1 is the worst, band 4 is the best. If you get band 1 in either paper, you've failed and you cannot be ranked, you cannot get a job. If you get at least band 2 in both papers, you will be ranked. But if you get 2 band 2s, there's a good chance you're not going to get a job because you won't be competitive. It's not a simple pass-fail exam. You're competitively ranked against 8,000 other people that are applying for GP training. You see, there's 4,000 odd jobs. So you see, there's going to be lots of people that will pass, but don't have a good enough score to get a job or to get a job in the area they want. Stage 3, then, you get ranked based on your MSRA scores again. Only your MSRA scores and nothing else. This year, there will be no OSCEs, there's no interviews, portfolios, there's no stage 3 selection center for GP this year, okay? So what they will do is they will rank everyone that passes the exam. Let's say 7,000 people pass. You'll get a rank 1 to 7,000 based on how did your score compare to everyone else that applied for GP training, okay? And if when they get to your place in the ranking, there is a job available in one of the areas that you picked, you'll get an offer. If that offer isn't your first choice, if you accept the offer, you can opt in for upgrade. If you don't get any offers at all, you'll be on the waiting list. You might get an offer later because some people will apply to more than one specialty and they will reject their GP offer and take, for example, their radiology offer, or they also applied for IMT and they got that offer, okay? Some people on the waiting list won't get a job. So if you don't get a job, you can apply in the next round. If you don't get a job in round 2, you could apply again in round 1 for 2024 entry. Okay, so then once you get an offer, then the pre-employment checks is stage 4. So they'll check your references, you'll go through occupational health, you need to get an enhanced police check. Those that are from outside of the UK and need a certificate of sponsorship or a work visa, a tier 2 visa, all of that will be sorted out at stage 4. Okay, so that's an overview of the stages. Just going to go into a little bit more detail into some of these. So the first one is F2 competences. Not everyone needs a certificate of readiness to enter specialty training. Okay, there's 4 common ways to prove your foundation competencies. So those of you that are at the moment in F2, just put your hands up. You can see the raise hand feature. So if you're in F2 at the moment and you're going to finish F2 by August 2023, when you apply, all you need to do is say, I'm in F2 and give the details of which foundation school. You don't need to upload any evidence at the time that you apply. Why? Because when you finish your FPC about a month before, so about July next year, you'll get your foundation program certificate of completion, and you will send that. Let's say for whatever reason, you don't finish foundation on time. Sometimes someone has to repeat one of the rotations, okay? And you're not going to get your FPC by time, you will lose that job offer. You could then apply in a different round because you no longer meet one of the basic eligibility criteria. But at the time that you apply, you're just going to say which foundation school you're in. For those that have already completed F2 in 2020 or later, you'll just confirm that you have an FPCC dated 2020 or later, and you'll upload that at the time that you apply. Hands up if that applies to you. You already did F2, and you have a foundation program certificate of completion in 2020, 2021, or 2022. So you will pick this option, and you will just upload it at the time that you apply. If you're currently in training in a different specialty, at the time of application, you can just select that option. You can just submit either your national training number or your deanery reference number. Everyone in training will have either a national training number or a deanery reference number. You just put the number in. And then because they will have checked your competence at the time that you applied and you're currently in training, that's all you need. For anyone that does not fit 1, 2, or 3, the only way that you're going to be able to submit F2 competencies is the CREST, the Certificate of Readiness to Enter Specialty Training. Okay, nothing else will be accepted. You couldn't submit a letter, for example, from a consultant. You need this form, right? Now, in terms of that form, you have to have it completed from a job that you did for at least 3 months continuously within 3.5 years of the start date of training. So you can see if you're going to start training in August 2023, you have to have it filled in from a job after January 2020. If you had it filled from a job in 2019, that will be rejected. Only one consultant or equivalent can complete that form, and all the competencies must be signed off. If even one is ticked unable to confirm, your CREST will be rejected. You're not eligible. You won't be able to have a job. Okay. And the current form for 2023 applications is the CREST 2021. Okay. So this is what it looks like. Can you see, like, either your consultant will sign they personally witnessed or evidence received. If they tick evidence received for any of these, on the last page, they'll say who gave that evidence. They have to be someone senior, an ST5 level registrar or more senior. And they have to say which competence that, that person witnessed. So as long as everything's ticked, either the consultants witnessed it themselves or they've had evidence from someone senior, it's okay. If even one is pink, unable to confirm, now this is just one page of like 10 pages worth of these things, right? But if even one of the 100-odd competencies is unable to confirm, 100% your application will be rejected. Your form will be invalid. It is not acceptable, okay? These are all essential criteria. They're the same criteria those doctors that are in foundation will need to get signed off to get their foundation program certificate of completion. You see, it's the same exact competencies, all right? So if you're longlisted, stage 2 is the MSRA. Now, the MSRA, Multi-Specialty Recruitment Assessment, is called that because the same exam is used by 12 different specialties, okay? So there's 2 papers. The SJT is first, and then you do the clinical. There's a minimum score in each paper for you to be ranked. But as I mentioned, it's not a simple pass-fail, it's competitively ranked. If you just about scrape a pass in both papers, the reality is you're probably not going to get a job, okay? There's hundreds, sometimes more than 1,000 doctors that will pass with a low rank that might not get a job offer that's suitable, okay? And so what happens is they take your score in each paper and they normalize it. How they do that is, let's say the average score, the mean score in the clinical paper this year, let's say 77%. Whoever gets 77%, their clinical score normalized will be exactly 250. The mean is always equated or normalized to 250. Anyone that scores lower than that mean score will get a score lower than 250. Anyone that gets higher will get a score higher than 250. Okay, so you get band 1 in either paper. Even if you get 100% in the other one, you won't be ranked. You cannot get a job. As long as you get band 2 or higher, you will get a rank. But for example, if someone that got 2 low band 2s, let's say someone got, I don't know, 200 and 200, 400 in total, they might be ranked 6,500 or something like that. It's only 4,000 odd jobs. So the odds that they're going to get a job is very low. Do you see? Okay. So what you're aiming for is to be up here. Aim for 2 band 4s, right? And if you're aiming for 2 band 4s and working towards that, even if you don't get it, you're going to get 2 high scores on it. Now, the clinical paper, 75 minutes, 97 questions, testing knowledge at the level of a foundation year 2 doctor. These are the clinical subjects, and they're equally spread, i.e. there'll be about as many cardiovascular questions as dermatology, ENT, and eyes combined, and about as many pediatrics questions as all of these combined. So this is the curriculum, okay? And then the SJT paper, also known as the professional dilemma paper, got 95 minutes to answer 50 SJT questions. It's very time pressured, both papers. So there's two types of questions. Half the questions roughly are ranking SJT. So you get a scenario, you get 4 or 5 options, and you rank them from best to worst. And then the other half roughly are selection questions. So you get a scenario, there's 8 options, you pick the 3 options that taken together make the best response. So these will be work-related scenarios, assessing your decision-making and judgment, mapped to these 3 domains: empathy and sensitivity, professional integrity, and coping with pressure. Now, each of these is broken down into lots of subdomains, which is what specific questions will test. And having a good working knowledge of GMC and ethical guidance, and having NHS exposure has been shown that it will make it much easier for you to see how to approach these things, okay? People with less or no NHS exposure tend not to score as well as those that have got NHS exposure. So how are you going to prepare? The first thing is to allow enough time to prepare, because, as I mentioned, it's not a simple pass-fail, but also allow time to prepare for both papers. I often see doctors that they spend a lot of time focusing on the clinical, and they get a great score. They get a very high score in high band 3, maybe even a band 4 in clinical. But because they didn't give enough importance to the SJT, they get a band 1 in the SJT. Even though your total score could be great, you'll fail. Okay? Or the other way. Some doctors, they're naturally really good at SJT, but they don't allow enough time. Clinical, it's not that the questions are hard, it's that the curriculum's very large, it's very broad, right? Can you see how many subjects were covered there? And so because they don't allow enough time, they get a band 1 in clinical and they get a band 4 in SJT. Just as bad in terms of that you will not get an offer. Okay. What you want to do is aim for the best score possible, not just to pass. And what you want to do is a mixture of practice questions and reading about the subjects to consolidate your knowledge. So you build exam technique, you get used to managing your time, but you also know your stuff. Please, please, if you haven't already started preparing, start preparing now, because you've got just over 2 months to the first date of the exam, 5th of January. You've got 2.5 months if you're sitting it towards the end of the exam, the 17th of January, okay? What you certainly don't want to do, a recipe for failure, is if you wait until you get invited to book, or you wait until the 21st of December. At that point, you've got like 2 weeks to the exam. The reality is you're not going to leave yourself enough time. You might, if you can cram and you've got a lot of time off and you can put in 10, 15 hours a day, yeah, you might pass. But passing doesn't mean you're going to get a job, or that you're going to get a job where you want it. You see, I don't want you to just get a job. I want you to get a job in your first choice area. To do that, make a start early, okay? Give yourself the best shot to cover everything and be prepared, okay? And if you want to read some articles on how to prepare, what different resources, doctors that scored really well, I'm talking about 600 plus, the top 5%, elite scorers scored. If you go to the GP training support blog and you look on the GPST entry section, I'll post that into the chat, you'll see that there's articles there from doctors that scored like 623, 618, 610, elite scorers, okay? And they've talked about how they prepared, what kinds of resources they used, and so on, okay? If you want to do some reading to sort of get some background knowledge, these are some useful resources. So the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Specialties covers a lot of the specialties that there are bunched together. We talked about like ENT, eyes, dermatology, things like that. You're going to get a good handle on, and it's enough of a level that you can score well in the MSRA. It's not enough to pass membership. You're not doing membership. The level of questions isn't membership level. It's the knowledge that's expected of a foundation year 2 doctor, okay? And then the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine covers the things like the cardiovascular, the respiratory, the endocrine, some of the bigger chunks, okay? Probably worth spending a day on the BNF just to look at the first section, which covers prescribing in palliative care, pain management, and principles of good prescribing. And if you've got time to look at they have like topic summaries or treatment summaries at the start of each chapter of the BNF. Spending a day or 2 on that, because there's a whole section in the exam. If I just go back to this slide, that one of the sections here, okay, is pharmacology and therapeutics. Do you see? And so that's quite a useful thing. Although if you're reading up about different specialties and just pay attention to the management, what's the first line of management, what's the second line of management for common conditions, you can also pick up things like that. The thing about the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine and Specialties is that both of these, there are some guidelines that have changed since they were published. These are the latest editions, but they're already out of date because guidelines change quite frequently. So if you want to cover lots of nice guidelines, national guidelines quickly, we publish our clinical case cards twice a year. So the latest edition, these have been updated in July 2022, covers 112 topics, and they map to the same things. The questions in the MSRA for the clinical, they're linked to either investigations, diagnosis, prescribing, management, or emergencies, okay? And so, like, for example, you can see notifiable disease. These were only added since the COVID pandemic. These are the latest impetigo guidelines, where first line, if it's localized, is hydrogen peroxide. In the old guidelines, we would have used fusidic acid first line and used flucloxacillin if it was severe. Okay, do you see what I mean? Okay, so they're up to date with 2022 guidelines. So that's a quick way if you want to cover a lot of topics quickly, and they're available in printed form, in digital form, or a bundle with both. Okay, so where you have a digital edition, there's 112 topics. And then the mainstay of your preparation should be practicing questions. So we have over 2,200 questions in the eMedica MSRA question bank, so over 2,000 clinical, and they're mapped to the exact same domains as the exam. I showed you those topics. They're exactly the same topics. You see, so like, musculoskeletal, renal, immunology and infectious disease, ophthalmology. And this isn't all of them, okay? It scrolls further. I'll just show you, okay? So we've got a study guide that you can download, the clinical questions. You see, so there's like cardiovascular, respiratory, gastroenterology, ENT, these like all the topics. We mapped it exactly to the curriculum headings. And like when you click a topic and you do the questions, if you get it wrong, you see, as well as reading the explanation, you might think, okay, let me read up a little bit more about this topic. Well, if you get it right, it might be enough for you to read the explanation here, okay? So each set of questions is 3. So you can see Pharma 1 will have 30 questions, Pharma 2 will have 30 different questions, Pharma 3, 30 different questions. You can repeat these questions as many times as you want. It's unlimited, okay? Then there's a whole section of SJT questions. So there's ranking questions, selection questions, there's timed mini mocks, there's a full timed mock. There's also some timed mini mocks for the clinical and 3 full clinical mocks. Again, all of this is included. And what's really good that a lot of people have said is all of the questions in these mini mocks and mocks are completely different to the ones you will have seen in these sections. We don't make you a mock from questions you've already seen. That gives you a false sense of security. You do a mock, it should be unique questions, so you test have I actually learned it, okay? And it includes a downloadable study guide, okay? What a lot of people say that use more than one bank is that ours are the closest to the real exam in terms of level, style, and the layout. Like our SJTs, for example, mark in the correct way. You actually drag and drop the ranking SJTs like in the real exam. It's going to take you, if you want to cover all the questions and the mocks once, you need 100 hours of study time to be able to cover all of them and read the explanations, okay? As I said, you can do it as many times as you want. And then some doctors want, as well as practice questions, they want teaching. So we have a 2-day MSRA grammar course that includes all those questions and mocks as part of the bundle. But the 2-day course is running on the 3rd and 4th of December. So the whole of the first day is clinical. So we'll cover, a lot of clinical guidelines concisely. You'll do a full clinical mock in time teaching conditions. We'll go through answers, explanations. You'll really focus on your technique. And the whole second day is SJT. Okay, so we'll cover all of the GMC and ethical guidelines. So, these are things that it might take you days or a couple of weeks to read all the different guidelines. We'll cover all of it in one concise day, but then we'll also cover a 30-question teaching mock. And before that, we'll do a load more of SJTs of the different types. High challenge questions mapped to the different domains so you understand how to approach different SJT scenarios, the exam technique, which is probably more important than knowledge for the SJT. Okay, so that bundle includes the 2-day course. You attend it via Zoom on the 3rd and 4th, plus you get access to the recording for a month afterwards. And it includes access to all of the questions until the end of January, okay, at a discounted price. And then these are the different sessions that we'll do on day one. These are the different sessions in day two. We've helped a lot of people improve their scores, or that are applying first time, get into competitive areas. So that's stage 2, MSRA, and how to prepare for it. Stage 3, job offers. At this stage, there's a few different options. If you get band 1 in either paper, you will not get an offer. You're not eligible. You'll be told that you didn't meet the requirements, apply again. If you get band 2 or more, you'll be ranked, but there's no guarantee you'll get a job. It depends how well you rank. If you rank really well, you're not going to get a job. If your rank isn't that competitive, you may or may not get a job, depending on what others that wanted the same area scored. Remember, your rank is based 100% on your MSRA scores, nothing else. 50% the SJT, 50% the clinical, okay? No OSCE, no interview, no portfolio station at all for GP this year. And when you get allocated an offer initially, it's at program level, i.e. you'll get allocated HEE, Health Education England, West Midlands, Birmingham and Solihull, not just West Midlands Deanery. So it's Birmingham and Solihull, but you won't know, for example, in Birmingham and Solihull Trust, there's 4 different hospitals. You won't know which hospitals until later. That can take a couple of months. Similarly, you might get allocated HEE London, the Chelsea and Westminster rotations. It doesn't mean that it's anywhere in London. It's specific areas that you get, but within that, there could be multiple hospitals, lots of different GP training practices. So that's an overview. And then part 4, remember, after this is just the pre-employment. They check your references. You'll have to do things like occupational health, police checks, and all of that, the formalities, basically, okay? So part 2, I want to cover the key changes and the frequently asked questions. And then after that, anyone that's got any other questions, I'll go through them. So key changes, what's really important is that this year, all doctors are going to be ranked based on the MSRA score only for GP. Now, historically, a long time ago, this was part of it. The rest of it would be, there used to be a second stage where there'd be OSCEs and a written essay paper. That was stopped during the pandemic. So one of the things that we didn't know until very recently, when it was confirmed that it's going to stay this way, is whether now the pandemic's over, whether they would go back to having that OSCE. There will be no OSCEs this year, okay? So one of the things that means is it's one of the things that's led to increased competition. See, previously, people would only apply for GP if they were interested in GP, because they knew that even if they do well in the MSRA, they then also had to prepare for these OSCEs and this written paper, and that required time. And if they were applying for a different specialty that had an interview rather than OSCE, how you prepare for an interview is different to how you prepare for an OSCE. Now, because, for example, let's say someone's applying for radiology, and they're going to have to prepare for their radiology interview and portfolio and the MSRA. Sometimes as a backup, they'll just apply for GP as well, because you only have to sit the MSRA once, okay? This year, core surgical training, which is very competitive, is also using the MSRA. So you may get some doctors that, again, will just apply to GP as a backup because of the fact that they're going to have to sit the MSRA and prepare for it anyway. So they think, what, why not? It's just one extra application I need to fill in, but I don't have to sit another exam. I'm going to sit this exam anyway. And so I think it's one of the things that's going to lead to increased competition. What else? That the CREST 2021 form is the current form, okay? So as long as the competencies are still in date, the 2021 form will be accepted, okay? It was done from a job 2020 or after, and everything's ticked off. The other thing that's new is that your MSRA scores can be carried over for up to 12 months for a GP application, for a future GP application only. You can't carry it for 12 months. Let's say you apply for GP and you get a good score, but you don't get the job in the area you want. You could use that same score in the next round or the round after. You're up to 12 months, okay? But you couldn't use that score, for example, for round 1, 2024 in a different specialty. You could for GP, if you sat it in round 1, 2023, because that will cover 12 months. You couldn't use that for a different specialty after round 2. Okay, so it's only for the same specialty for GP. Now, if you have already sat it in the last 12 months and you've got a score, you have to decide at the time of application. You can't, for example, say, I want to carry over my score and I want to resit the exam and I see which one's better. If you choose to carry over your score, you will not be allowed to resit the exam. If you choose to resit the exam, your old score is gone and your new score will be used, even if it's lower, okay, than the one that you've already got. The other thing is that deferral is now only allowed for statutory reasons. Previously, you could apply, and if you weren't ready to start trading in August, you could ask, can I defer for 6 months and start in 6 months? I'm trying to finish my master's degree or something like that. You can't do that now. The only reasons you can apply to defer are maternity, paternity, or you yourself being ill. You couldn't apply, for example, because a family member is unfortunately ill and you're caring for them. That's not a statutory reason. That's why you could, if you had a good score and you can't start, carry that score over for up to 12 months. This has replaced non-statutory deferral. So if you need to defer, you can only do so for these reasons. If this isn't the reason and you're not going to be able to start in August, either sit it and choose to carry your score over, or just prepare for a different round. Okay. So let's look at some of the frequently asked questions that I get asked or I see asked in the groups. So question number one, I won't have enough experience by a few weeks. There'll be someone who say, look, I will have 24 months clinical experience, including my internship, by September. I won't have it by the start of August. I'm just like 4 weeks short. Can I apply? No, the application is invalid. You must meet all of the eligibility criteria. Similarly, someone said, I've got my CREST signed off, but I'll have 18 months experience at the start of training. Can I apply? You can apply, but your application will be rejected. Okay. Why? Because just because you've got the CREST signed off, that's one eligibility criterion. You haven't met the other one, which is 2 years experience by the start date of training. Okay. Similarly, someone might say, look, can I apply if I don't have GMC yet? If you don't have it yet, but you're going to get it soon and you meet everything else, you could apply. But for example, let's say you apply and for whatever reason you don't get your GMC in time, you will lose the offer. You don't meet one of the basic criteria. You have to meet all of them. Another question, do I need UK or NHS experience, or can I apply directly? You don't need it. So the 2 years clinical experience could be anywhere in the world. Okay. But I would strongly recommend getting at least 6 months NHS experience before starting GP training. Because in GP training, from the first week that you start training, you start getting assessed. Okay. And in training jobs, you're not going to have a shadowing period like you can get in a non-training post to adapt to a new system, to adapt to a new country. And unfortunately, I've seen lots of doctors over the years who directly started in training, first job ended up in a GP practice, overwhelmed by all of the changes, getting used to a computer system, being in a room on their own and not being as part of a big team on a ward round, for example. And then it was realized that they weren't at the competency level and basically they were asked to leave training. And if you're asked to leave training in that circumstance, usually you can't apply again in future. Okay. That same doctor, if they spent 6 months getting NHS experience, getting comfortable with the system, they would have been absolutely fine. It's not that they weren't, good clinically. It's getting used to everything else. It's a very different system. And you're also adapting to lots of other things. But what's unique about GP is the fact that because it's only 3 years, you start getting assessed from year one. Whereas a lot of other specialties, you don't have to sit higher exams. You don't get assessed so much, like in the first few weeks. So that's really important. Okay. You don't have to. Some doctors can cope. I'm not saying that you absolutely can't because it's allowed, but I would strongly recommend it. Okay. Again, another question, can a consultant outside the UK sign my CREST? Yes, if they meet the requirements, i.e. they're a consultant, they're on the equivalent of the specialist register in their country, and you include a copy of that registration, and that they've supervised you for at least 3 months continuously, full-time equivalent, after January 2020, and all of the competencies are signed off. Okay. By the way, if you have 3 months or more NHS experience, you cannot get a CREST sign from outside the UK. You must sign it from your UK consultant. Once you have 3 months NHS experience or more, you must sign it from the UK. Some questions that people ask about the MSRA. How long does it take to prepare for the MSRA? That question has a lot of variables because that would depend on what's your existing knowledge like. Have you recently prepared for other similar exams? Have you been doing one specialty for a long time and haven't touched ophthalmology or obstetrics for 10 years, for example? Are you working full-time at the moment? Do you have a young family? Do you have caring responsibility for someone else? How many hours a day can you put in? As I mentioned, it's going to take 100 hours to just cover all these questions with the answers and explanations and do all the SJTs and the mocks once. Okay. If you also then want to read up on some of the topics that you do less well, go over some questions that you did less well, or some topics that you're less confident in more than once, might take longer. So, 100 hours, one person that can do, let's say someone's not working at the moment, and they might be able to study 5-6 hours a day. They might be able to do it in a month or two, allow them time to go over things. They might use another resource as well as this. Okay. Someone who can only do an hour a day, you see, it might take them more than 3 months. Maybe they do a little bit more on the weekends. It might take them 3 months to put in 100 hours. Okay. someone that can not even do an hour every day because they've got a lot of on-calls, they're working full-time, they've got a lot of responsibilities outside of work. They might do half an hour some days, an hour some days. On the weekend, they might squeeze in an hour and a half. They might prepare for 6 months or even a year. We have doctors that start a year in advance. There's some doctors that do it in a couple of months. But certainly what I would say is, because it's not pass-fail, it's competitively ranked. The better you score, the better chance you get the job that you want. Is if you haven't already started, start now. Okay. Another question, how many times can I apply? There's no limit. How much does it cost? Costs nothing. How can I book the MSRA? This is a really common question. People have heard about it and they say, oh, I can't find how to book. That's because you can't just book it. It's not a standalone exam. You apply for specialty training when the applications are open. If you meet the criteria for training, you'll be invited to book. You cannot book until you get that invitation. If you don't meet the criteria, you won't get an invitation. You can't just sit the exam. Do you see? Okay. And then another question that people often ask me, should I transfer my score or resit? That also has a lot of variables. Let me show you. Okay. This is data that I've collated from different doctors that shared their score and their rank from round 1, 2022. Okay. Bear in mind, 2023 is expected to be much more competitive, i.e. the same score is likely to get a lower rank. But just to give you an idea, if you scored 600 or more combined between the two papers, your rank would have been lower, i.e. you would be in the top 250 doctors in the country. Someone that scored 593, they ranked 303rd. Someone that scored 540, they ranked 1,816. This doctor wanted a few specific places in London and they did not get an offer in the first wave of offers. They were on the waiting list. They later did get an offer as other people dropped their offers. Just to give you an idea, that's a great score. That's a very good rank. 1,816 out of 6,600 and something doctors that passed the exam, and over 7,600 that applied in the first place. Okay, do you see? It's a very good score, but they still didn't get the job initially. They had to wait on the waiting list until they found out later that they did get a job. Okay, someone that got the mean score in the clinical and the mean score in the SJT, they would score 500. They would rank 3,100. I can see someone that ranked 3,100. Let's say that they're working in an area they like, their kids are in school, and they don't want to move out of that area. So they've only picked a few places nearby that they could commute to. If the 3,099 people that ranked higher than that wanted those jobs, they might not get an offer, even with that score. Okay, down to 466. That's 4,335. That's 4,200 odd jobs expected. You can see this is someone who'll be on the waiting list at the start. They wouldn't have an offer. They may not get one eventually. They may get one eventually, depending on the areas they want and whether there's a slot there. Someone that scored 420, you're going to rank like 6,000 and lower. So what I would say is, if you scored 500 or more, and you're flexible and willing to go anywhere in the UK, carry the score over. If you want specific areas, especially popular areas like London, Birmingham, Manchester, okay, then even with a score of 500, I would recommend you resit to try and improve your score, okay? If you scored less than 500 and you want popular areas or specific areas, I would definitely say you should resit and aim to improve your score, okay? And certainly if you're scoring in the sort of 466 or lower, it's almost certain at that score, you're not getting an offer in the first wave. You're going to be on the waiting list, and then you're waiting to see if someone drops, you may or you may not get one. And one of the things I recommend you do now is start researching which areas you want, because what some doctors do is they put down every single area. They haven't done any research about it. Then they get an offer somewhere they don't want. And when you reject an offer, you won't get any more. That's it, your application ends. Whereas, if they'd only put down the places that they want, they will still be on the waiting list. They might get an offer later. Okay, so spend some time researching. You've still got time now. But as I mentioned, 2023, I expect it to be much more competitive for several reasons. Number one, there's just more doctors in foundation, more international graduates that passed PLAB last year and the year before. Okay, significantly more than the 2 years before that. And so there's just more doctors in the system, right? Foundation was expanded a few years ago. So the numbers that are finishing foundation in 2023 are much higher than those that finished 2022, which were higher than 2021, okay? Second reason, core surgical training, which is a very competitive specialty, is now using the MSRA. So you'll get some doctors that are applying for core surgical training that will apply for GP as a backup. and think, I might do that for a year. If I don't get core surgical, which is very competitive, I'll give it as a dry run. I'll be in training. I can work on my portfolio, and then I'll apply again. Okay. I don't think that's a good idea, by the way. Okay. You should only apply for GP training if you really want to be a GP. But people will do this. Okay. And so I suspect there will be a lot more people applying for GP. It will be more. Someone that gets 500 this year, they might not get a rank this high. Their rank might be lower because of more competition. Okay. So just to recap how we can help, and then I'll take questions. We've been helping people get into GP training, get through and get excellent scores in the MSRA 17 odd years now. Okay. We first started running our Getting into GP training course, which covers, by the way, this course is running this Saturday from 1 till 6. Okay. We will cover in detail the whole application. We'll go through it step by step. What are the common reasons people have the application rejected at application stage? Exactly how to, get through all of those. We'll actually practice some questions for the clinical paper and the SJT paper. We'll look at what are those key domains. We'll, touch on some of those things. We'll look at how to rank in a way that you maximize your chance of getting the job that you want. But we'll also look at what will happen when you get into training. What's the structure of training, structure of MRC GP, and some of the current GP hot topics, some of the things that are going to impact you during training and after. So that's running this weekend, okay? If you want a complete understanding, step by step, of everything, that's what this course is for, okay? And then I mentioned earlier, our MSRA 2-day crammer course is on the 3rd and 4th of December, okay? 14 hours of live CPD, interactive, via Zoom, 9:30 to 6:15 each day. Saturday is clinical, Sunday is SJT. You can, if you want, just book one day or the other. Like some doctors just want help with the SJT, some doctors just want help with the clinical, because they've sat it once, got a good score in one, not in the other. But if you book the full 2-day course, you get access to all of our questions included until the end of January. So, you save yourself 90 odd pounds from that. Plus, this is cheaper than if you book the 2 days separately, even without the questions. So you'd save over 120 pounds compared to booking the 2 days and, getting the questions separately. A lot of doctors, they might prefer to do their own reading or have a study group where they'll do, little tutorials themselves. They feel that they don't need teaching, they just want practice questions. Well, our MSRA question bank is the original, gets updated every year. One of the things that lots of people say is an example that, often people will use more than one resource, that this is the closest to the real exam. We get that feedback a lot, okay? But it's mapped to the curriculum, so you can systematically study, okay? And then I talked to you about the case cards. Now, we have a bundle that includes all of this. So the course this Saturday, the 2-day crammer course, access to all of the questions and marks, and access to the printed case cards, all together in one bundle. That's our GPST Entry Pass Plus bundle. So over 125 hours of learning, covers all of that. And you also, at any point, you've got dedicated support to ask any and every query you want. You don't need any code. If you just go to our website, emedica.co.uk, and you look at here, GP Entry, okay, it's here. So it's this one here. It gives you all of that in one go for a discounted price. Okay. So part 3. Now we've covered all the common questions and we've covered an overview of the process and how we can help you if you need help and support. Anyone's got any questions, please feel free to ask. Just in case anyone hasn't got questions, I'm just going to do the summary and then I'll stay back and answer questions. So just to recap, look, there's 4 stages. Stage 1 is the application and long listing. Applications are opening on the 3rd of November. They close on the 1st of December. Everyone that meets the eligibility criteria will be long listed. So the most important ones are 2 years clinical experience by the start date of training. So you'll list all the jobs you've done, what jobs you're going to be doing between now and August, so they can see that you'll have 2 years. F2 competency signed off. Now for GP, if you don't have that at the time, let's say you don't have your CREST at the time, you can apply for an extended deadline. They haven't said the exact date yet, but last year for round 1, that was April. Every other specialty, you need your CREST at the time that you apply if you need the CREST, okay? And I covered earlier some of the other ways you can prove F2 competencies. And then you must have GMC registration and a license to practice by the start date of training, okay? Stage 2, if you're long listed, you're going to sit the exam in January. Professional dilemma first, 50 SJT questions in 95 minutes, then the clinical problem solving paper straight after, 97 MCQs in 75 minutes. They're equally weighted. The higher you score, the greater your chance of getting a good rank and getting an offer. Then Stage 3 is the ranking of the job offer. So you'll be ranked nationally based on how is your score compared to everyone else that passed and applied for GP. So I expect this year the ranking will be out of about 7,000 plus, i.e., let's say 7,000 people pass out of the 8,000 plus that sit the exam. You get a rank 1 to 7,000 based on where are you compared to everyone else. Whoever gets the highest score in the country, they rank number 1. They're definitely going to get their first choice job. Do you see? The offers will be based on your rank, but also the availability of jobs in the areas that you've picked. Now, if you don't get your first choice, as long as you've ranked correctly, i.e. you've ranked all the places you want based on genuine preference, not ranked any you don't want, you can be on the waiting list and you may get an offer later. If you don't, you can apply again, okay? And then stage 4 is the pre-employment check, all right? So I want to leave you with 2 messages. The first, to succeed, we must first believe that we can, from Michael Corder. Now, sometimes doctors get in their head that I want London and it's really competitive, you know, I don't think I can do it. If you've already decided you can't do it, you're right, you can't, because you've got a negative mindset and you're not going to work towards it. Don't bother. You're already correct that you're not good enough. You've set that yourself though. Whereas if you first think somebody's going to get into London, why can't I? Okay. To get through medical school, you've shown that you're intelligent, you're hardworking. Can you see? Someone can get in. Why can't you? If you have that mindset, like, I think I can do it, but I know it's going to be hard because it's competitive and popular, but I'm going to work towards it, and you put the hours in, well, then other doctors have scored really high scores, so can you. It's going to change your mindset. You see, mindset's really, really important. Look at this doctor. Scored 618, ranked 5th in GP, 2nd in psychiatry, got offers for both. They actually got offer for child and adolescent mental health in the Maudsley. There was only 1 job in that round, is the most sought after CAMS rotation. They picked psychiatrists, which means that even though they ranked 5th in the whole country for GP, someone else got their GP offer. Okay, it's a fantastic score. All right, this is someone they prepared for the exam with young kids and working and trying to manage it all, but they still managed to do it. They had a positive attitude. They came to the course. They did lots of questions, as well as our question bank. They did another one to get more exposure. They did really well. Similarly, not giving up, really important. Is someone that, although they didn't apply for GP, they applied for anesthetics. They've got 552, really good score. But in anesthetics, the MSRA is a much smaller part. And then there's also interview. It wasn't enough. They didn't get a job for anesthetics. They came on the course. They went up from 552 to 625. This score would get you a job in any area in the UK for GP training. Any area in London even. That's a phenomenal score. It's like the top 2 or 3%. They then went on to rank 6th in the country for anesthetics and got one of the most sought after London jobs. Okay, they're now in anesthetics training. Similarly, here's someone else that had really struggled with the SJT, and they really found that having teaching on it rather than just doing questions made it much clearer. It helped to demystify this, and they had a framework to approach any SJT scenario, and they got their first choice GP offer, again, in a very popular place. And lastly, from Malcolm X, that the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So look, now you've got a clear idea. What I want you to do is go away and put the hours in, put the work in. You know what to expect, you know what to do, but you've got to do it. So if you haven't already started, please start practicing questions, start doing some reading, just work on it. The more you put in, it's not simple pass fail, all right? But the more you put in, the more effort you make. It might be 1 mark. That's the difference between getting your first choice job and getting your second choice. That 1 mark might be the difference between getting a job and not getting a job at all. You see, 1 mark can make a difference. So don't give up hope. Start with a positive attitude, but then put the effort in, work towards it, and come the results. I get an email from every one of you. Oh yeah, just to let you know, I got my first choice job. So for anyone that hasn't got questions, thank you so much. I hope it's been helpful. I will leave you to carry on, and I hope to see some of you come for the GPST Entry Pass Plus bundle or any of these individual bits. I'll leave that on there while I answer questions. So someone's asked, when's the deadline to upload CREST form? So usually you would upload it at the time of application. For GP only, if you don't have it at the time of application, you can apply for an extended deadline. It's just an option in the exam to say, I haven't got it, then you can submit it by the extended deadline. That hasn't been confirmed yet. It will be confirmed later this week, but last year it was beginning of April, okay? Someone said that they're working as a locum. Will this count in the 2 years clinical experience? Good question. It depends. So if you're working a long-term locum in one place, let's say you're doing a 3-month job as a locum in one place full-time, that counts as experience. Let's say you're working through an agency, you do a day here then you do a couple of shifts at a different week, then you do, that's counted as a career gap. Ad hoc locums are not counted as experience, okay? Someone said about NHS experience, can I get it via clinical attachment? No, clinical attachment is considered a career gap. It doesn't count towards experience. If you mean, can you use that to just get exposed? While that's better than nothing, I would recommend actually doing a non-training job or FY2 training job. There's FY2 standalone. Working in the NHS as a doctor before you start GP training. I would strongly recommend that, okay? Someone said, kindly let us know the topics covered in the 2-day grammar course. There's too many to list, okay? We'll cover over 100 different clinical topics on the first day, and we'll do a timed teaching mock. We'll also cover exam technique for the clinical paper. On the second day, we'll cover every single one of the core GMC and ethical guidance that you need for this exam. We'll cover the breakdown of all the subdomains that make up each of the 3 domains that are being assessed. And we'll go through lots of high challenge, high yield SJT scenarios and how to approach different SJT scenarios and give you a framework to answer any SJT question, okay? Someone said they were offered a job last year but didn't accept it. Would that make any difference to their application? No, it makes no difference. Someone said, how does F2 competencies work for a trust grade? You need the CREST. Someone said, can they use the eMedica app on their phone or does it only work on the computer? Great question. So first of all, it's not an app, it's online. However, it's fully responsive. So look, if you look at it on a computer, it looks one way. If you look at it on a phone, it adjusts like this. It looks like an app. So you need internet access, but you can use it on a tablet, you can use it on a computer, a laptop, you can use it on Mac, you can use it on a phone, okay? Someone said, are all GP programs 1 year hospital and 2 years GP? Pretty much all of them. The few that aren't will be changing to that. Someone said, can they apply for IMT and GP training at the same time? You can apply for as many different specialties as you want at the same time. However, for every single one, you need to fill in a completely separate application on Oriel, okay? Someone said, I already have a family in a certain place. Can I appeal to have that space for that reason? No, yeah. Want to get a specific place, get a really good score, so you get your first choice, okay? Can a locum consultant sign off the CREST? Only if they're on the specialist register. If they're not, it will be rejected. Do I need to have a driving license during GP training? You don't have to, but if you don't have a driving license and you can't drive, in GP training, you will be doing home visits regularly when you're in the GP part of your rotation. So one of the things you'll do at the time of application, if you don't have a driving license, you'll have to tick the box to say, I will provide my own transportation, i.e. you'll pay for taxis. Now that can be really expensive because they won't reimburse that, but it's also really inconvenient. And someone's asked, if I join the grammar course, when will the subscription start? So the subscription starts straight away. It takes a day or so for us to set up. So let's say you signed up today. By tomorrow, you'd have access to the questions. So you start doing questions now, then you come to the course, then you still got access to the questions to the end of January. And then after the course, you can email us if you want access to the recording of all 14 hours of the teaching, and you can get access to the recording in case you want to go over any parts before your exam. Okay, thank you very much. Someone asked, is the case cards online? I'll show you. So the case cards, it depends what you want. If you just want the printed cards, they're available in the UK. You click buy now and you click that. If you want just the digital ones, if you click subscribe now, you can have just the digital cards, instant access, available anywhere in the world, okay? If you want both the digital ones and the printed ones posted to the UK, click the bundle. It's cheaper than buying them both separately, okay? So you've got 3 options. You want the printed ones and the digital cards, pick this one. You want just the digital ones, pick this one. If you just want the physical ones, click buy now, okay? And you get them posted to the UK, right? So I hope that helps. Thanks very much, and a huge thank you again to Mariam. As I mentioned before, have a positive attitude, work hard, and I hope you get your first choice. Like anything in life, prepare and you will succeed. Thank you so much. All the best with your application.